my name is Matthew Penning and I'm here with another lecture snippet. If you've been following along on this series of the Server 2012 operating system, I've already promoted my computer to a domain controller, and now I want to be able to add computers to this domain. But I have a bit of a problem, and that's the fact that whenever the computers start up, they're going to accept the DHCP settings from my router. And so if you remember from the series, I have a router and I have this server on my network. And now I've just introduced another computer, and that's going to be a client. And I have a Windows 10 computer that I've added here. And you can see the Windows 10 computer here. When I turn this computer on, it gets the DHCP settings from my router, which means it gets an address, it gets information about the DNS server, and it gets information about the gateway, all from my router. I have three different options that I can look at here on my network. I can either change the settings within my router so that it gives the DNS address to my domain controller I've already set up. If I do that, then I could just leave the router as my DHCP server. However, for a medium-sized or even small businesses size company, it's probably not the best option. Most people don't like to use the router, especially if it's a router from an internet service provider, as their DHCP server. We want more functionality usually. So what I can do is I can set up that role here within the server, which is my second option, which I can actually install the DHCP role and then be able to issue out addresses to all of my clients. And that's the option that I'm going to prefer. The third option is I could come to my client computer like this one here on this Windows 10 computer, and I can actually just put in static IP information and then point to the DNS server, which would be my domain controller. And then once I do that, it can join to my domain. Now the problem with that is if I have a large number of computers, I may not want to take the time to be able to go in and actually assign specifically IP addresses and setting that all up. So I'm going to choose the option of actually setting up the role within my DHCP server, and that'll hand out the addresses and all the information to my clients so that they can join my domain very easily, which I'll do that in the next video. So let's go back over to my server and let's go ahead and add this role in here to the domain controller. So what I'm going to need to do is go to the dashboard here, and then we're going to choose the option to add roles and features. I'll go ahead and click on that, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit next for the first page. I'm going to leave the role-based installation, so I'll go ahead and hit next again. And I only have one controller that I'm actually managing, which is the DC1 in my case, and I can see the IP address of it right there, and I'm just going to go ahead and just hit simply next. Okay, now I get to actually pick the role that I want to install, and I'm going to choose the DHCP server role. I'll need to go ahead and hit add features, and as I said, this is going to allow me to be able to give out addresses to the clients on my network or on my LAN. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next again, and I'll just hit next one more time, and let's go ahead and hit next again, and now I can actually go and hit install. Now this is going to take about 1 to 2 minutes to go through and install this role on my computer. I still have a couple things that I'm going to need to do in order to have it fully configured, kind of similar to the whole Active Directory installation where we had to then promote it. Well, I've got a couple things that I need to do, so I'm going to let this run. I'll go ahead and pause my video, and then when it's done, we're going to go ahead and continue. Okay, so the role has installed, and so what I'm going to do is I need to complete the actual configuration here. I can click on this link here, which you see complete DHCP configuration, but if you happen to hit close, you can also find it here on the notification flag. So there it is, complete DHCP configuration. And I'll go ahead and click on that. I still need to do one more thing after this. I'm going to actually have to create the scope. So this is not the last step, but I'm just going to go ahead and hit next. I'm going to use my administrator credentials for this, so all I need to do is hit commit. And I can go ahead and hit close. Now as I mentioned, we're still not done. So what I'm going to do now is come up here to Tools, and then I'm going to choose DHCP. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and expand this console that I have here, and let me move this over so that I can see a little bit more of what I'm working with. I can see here is my internal domain that I have set up. You can see DC1 is the computer that I have on this domain. This is my DHCP server. I'm going to go ahead and expand that. I can work with both version 4 and version 6 of our IP protocols. I'm going to go ahead and just right click on version 4. You can see where it says new scope. What I need to do is expand that. There we go. I'll go ahead and click on it. Now I can go ahead and hit new scope. I just had to have it selected. So I'll go ahead and choose new scope. And let's go ahead and begin this wizard here. So I'll hit next on the first one. The second one here is giving me an option to type in a name. So you can type in really pretty much whatever you want here. I'm just going to call this one internal LAN. And I'll go ahead and hit next. Now I have a range of addresses that I can give out. If you remember, let's go back to my command prompt here. And I'll go ahead and type in ipconfig. I have an address of 10.0.2.15 with a subnet mask which looks like a class C subnet mask here of 255.255.255.0, which means on my network I have to keep 10.0.2 based on the settings that I have here for my network, and I really have from 1 to 254 as far as addresses on this last octet that I have here. So I need to pick a range of addresses that will work for what I want. So I'm just going to go ahead and do 10.0.2. I'll go ahead and just pick from 100 to 200. So 10.0.2.200. Now it looks like a class A address, so it gave me the class A subnet mask, but it's not. So I'm going to bump mine up to 24. There we go. And 255.255.255 is listed here now. So I'm going to basically be giving out addresses to my clients from 100 to 200, which means that depending on the size of your network, this may work for a small network, but for a very large network, I probably am going to need a larger range of addresses, and this class C address setup, or the subnet mask that I have set up here, probably will not work. But for a small business, this could work. I'll go ahead and hit next. And I do not have any exclusions, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit next again. Now the lease duration is telling your computers how long they can keep that address that's been assigned to them. There are some advantages to a shorter one, and that's the fact that if you have a lot of computers turning over in your network, they won't hold on to that lease for very long and it can be reissued to somebody else. Again, on the opposite side of it is if you give a long lease time, well, that address is going to be reserved until that lease is over. So what I'm going to recommend here is just leaving this the default of 8 days. That's a pretty good average, so I'll just go ahead and hit next. And it says that I can configure the DHCP options for the scope. So I'm just going to go ahead and say yes, I want to configure these options now. I'll go ahead and hit next. Now I can put in the address of a gateway, which in my case on my network, since I only have a router, I have this server, and I have a client computer, my gateway is the actual router that I have on my network. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in the 10.0.2.1 and I'll go ahead and hit add. And that's going to give to every one of my clients the information that says, hey, if you're going to leave our network, this is the computer or address or device on our network that you have to actually send your traffic to leave our network. I'll go ahead and hit next. And I've got a parent domain here that says, and I could change this if I needed to, but this is what the actual domain for my network is. I'm going to leave everything default because that's my domain. It's called internal.lecturesnippets.com. I'll go ahead and just hit next. Actually, no, I'm not going to hit next here. I just looked and saw I need to configure the DNS server that's going to also be on my network. So before I hit next, I just want to show you that I already have in here 10.0.2.15, which happens to be my address for my domain controller. So this is the DNS server that's going to be issued out, or the information for the DNS server that will be issued out to all the clients here on my network. Now that's a key thing, as I'd mentioned when I first started the video, because when the client then looks to join the domain of lecture snippets or internal.lecturesnippets.com, it's going to refer back to this DNS server and it's going to ask it if it knows this domain. And that's really important because If it knows the domain, of course, then I can then join the domain. So I need to have that set, which is by default here. So I'll just go ahead and hit next. Now I'm not running any of the Win servers or anything like that, so I'll just go ahead and hit next. And it's asking me if I want to activate the scope now, which means it's actually going to turn it on and then start issuing out addresses if I activate it. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit next and finish. Now keep in mind, it is set up here. Keep in mind that if you have another competing device on your network that's a DHCP server, the first one that responds back to the client is usually the one that the client will accept and then take the address from that device. So I need to turn off the DHCP settings here within my router so it does not compete with this server on my LAN. So I've already done that, and I'm going to go ahead and switch back over now to the client. Okay, so I'm here on the client computer now, and I'm just going to go ahead and open up the command prompt CMD, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in ipconfig and then space /release, and that's going to release any of the previous DHCP information that was already on my client computer. And then I'm just going to go ahead and do the same command but with renew instead of release. ipconfig space / and then renew. And this is going to send out another DHCP request and ask a server to give it an address. And you can see right here now, if I look, it's gone ahead and grabbed 10.0.2.100, which is going to be the address that our DHCP server, and that's the first address of my lease, that the DHCP server that we just set up will hand out. It also has a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, which is what we had, and it has the gateway of 10.0.2.1. Now I like to make sure that I can ping my domain controller, so I'll just type in ping, and we'll do 10.0.2.15, and it looks like I can ping that. I should also be able to do ping, and the name of that computer was DC1, and you can see that I can ping DC1, that's the name of the computer, and that's because it has the name from our DNS server of DC1, and it basically is resolving that name for me. And you can see it says pinging dc1.internal.lecturesnippets.com, and it's gone ahead and grabbed that address from our DNS server as well. Okay, if I type in ipconfig space / all, I can also see that under the DHCP server, there it is, it's 10.0.2.15. So that's been set up as well. If I switch back over to my server and I take a look here under my scope, you can see that I have the address pool, which is from 100 to 200. I have my leases, which I've just given a lease out. I have the lease expiration listed here, and you can see it's DHCP. This is the MAC address of my computer. Alright, I have no reservations, but I could add some more. Under my scope options, I have the router, which is my gateway, which is 10.0.2.1. I have the DNS server that I'm also issuing out to our clients, which is 2.15 on my network. And then I have the DNS domain name, which is internal.lecturesnippets.com. So that client computer, that Windows 10 computer that I just had, will receive all three of these bits of information as well as an IP address from this server. And now we're ready to take that computer and join it to our domain. So in the next video, I'm actually going to join that Windows 10 computer to this domain. If you want to learn more about Server 2012, visit my website at lecturesnippets.com.